All right, so who's passionate about WordPress themes? All right, full room. Cool, so today I'm going to give you 7 tips that will make you a better theme developer. And some of them are going to be a little technical, but you will get all the source code and reference links and notes on my blog at Kovshenin.com. We'll do a short Q&A if we have time after the session, and if you have any further questions, you can always reach me on Twitter. So let's get started. First things first, getTemplatePart is your friend. GetTemplatePart is a function which is used to include other files in your theme. But getTemplatePart is not just a regular PHP include or require. GetTemplatePart is a very special way because of its fallback model and shell theme awareness. And to understand that, let's take a look at a couple of examples. So getTemplatePart something will attempt to include something.php in your theme. Now notice that getTemplatePart already knows the directory where your theme is stored, whether it's your child theme or your parent theme. Now if you're running a child theme context, getTemplatePart will attempt to include something.php from your child theme first, and if that does not exist, we'll fall back to something.php in your parent theme. Let's take a look at an example with a more complex situation. We have the optional second argument, so getTemplatePart something else will attempt to include something-else.php in your theme, and if that is not found, it will include something.php. And in the child theme concept, this gets a little bit trickier. So first it'll include something else.php in your child theme. Then it will fall back to something else.php in your parent theme. If those are not found, it will look for something.php in your child theme first, and finally fall back to something.php in your parent theme. So this might be a little bit tricky to understand at first, but it'll get so much easier once you get to actually use this stuff. There are a lot of great examples with breadcrumbs and navigation and pagination and so on. And also we've got the last 2 standard themes with WordPress 2011 and 2012, which introduced this sort of concept of breaking down our post output based on the post format. So as a second argument, we pass the getPostFormat function to getTemplatePart. So if our post is a gallery, this will attempt to include content_gallery.php. And if our post is a quote, it'll try to include content_quote.php. So as a child theme developer, it would be very easy for me to, for example, override the quote output by creating a content_quote.php file in my child theme. So this makes the parent theme a little bit more flexible to work with. Our next tip is enqueue, scripts, and styles. If you're working with themes, you're probably working with JavaScript files and style sheets, and you should never hard code these in your header.php file, but instead use the WP enqueue script and WP enqueue style functions. You should also make sure that you're using these functions within the WP enqueue scripts action. Let me just make that a little bit smaller so that it will fit. Okay, so this will make sure that whatever scripts and styles are enqueued can easily be dequeued with a plugin or a child theme. And it's very important for the child theme context because a child theme might not always want to use all of its parents' scripts and styles. So having an easy way to remove those styles or replace them with something else without having to override the whole header file makes your theme pretty flexible. One other bonus of using these functions is the automatic dependency resolution. So if our script, for example, depends on libraries like jQuery or our script. Final word on the functions that we often use to get the theme directory, the theme URL, when working with enqueuing scripts and styles. We've got 2 functions to deal with these. The getTemplateDirectory URI, this returns the URL for our parent theme, and the getStyleSheetDirectory URI, which returns the directory for our child theme. Now when working in a parent theme, both functions return the same result, so it might be a little bit confusing, but to test whether you've used the right function, it's as easy as just switching to a child theme context and seeing whether your theme breaks or not. So that's scripts. Next up is customizer versus theme options. Who here uses the customizer in their themes? Okay, cool. So a lot of themes come bundled with theme options pages that let you sort of configure several visual aspects of a theme, like fonts and colors and so on. So in version 3.4, WordPress introduced this new thing called the customizer, which is a totally awesome end-user experience and a breeze for theme developers to incorporate with its very flexible API. So the customizer has got a lot of pre-built controls for things like text and checkboxes and drop-down selects and so on, as well as more complex controls such as say the color picker or the image uploader. And you can always extend any of those controls to fit your own needs and then reuse these controls in your future projects. Some themes choose to implement both the theme options page and the customizer settings. So I would suggest not to do that because, first of all, it's confusing for end users because they have the same options in two different places. And secondly, it's just a waste of time. As you know, theme options panels are very different. They're not always the same unless we're using the settings API. And they can be quite difficult to build because the APIs that are now available are not as easy to use as the customizer API, and after all, the customizer has been made to customize themes. So use the customizer. Next up, add an editor style. Who knows what an editor style is? Okay, so I'm not a big fan of the visual editor in WordPress, and one of the reasons is that most themes don't add an editor style. So last time I checked on WordPress.org, out of 1,600 themes, only 200 had an editor style. But what's the point of using the visual editor if what you see looks nothing like what you get? It's very easy to add an editor style to your theme. All you need is call the add editor style function during your theme setup and create an editor style CSS file in your theme. You don't even have to write the whole CSS from scratch. In fact, 99% of it is going to simply be copy-pasted from your original style sheet. And themes with editor style look much prettier on the inside and are much more easy to work with, and users won't have to spend a whole lot of time previewing their posts and aligning their images because they're seeing the same thing in the backend and on the front end. So editor styles. Next up, my favorite, don't use query posts. I'll try not to get too technical with this, but basically there are three ways to query in WordPress. We've got the WP query class, we've got the get posts function, and we've got the query post function. Now, each of these functions is a way to create a secondary query in WordPress. But query post is the one that does this in a very special and funky way, which makes you think that you're altering the main loop. So that's a wrong assumption. And what happens in reality with query post is that query post fires a secondary loop but replaces the main loop with that loop. So if you don't know what you're doing, it's very easy to break things like pagination and page titles and so on. So my rule of thumb is use WP query or get posts if you want secondary queries, meaning if you want something in addition to your main query. And if you want to alter the main query, we have two options. We have the pre-get posts action and the less popular request filter. I recently asked on Twitter what were the main use cases for query posts in WordPress themes, and the top three were featured posts, custom post types on the front end, and minor things like exclude a category from the stream. So the last two are fairly easy with pre-get posts. Yeah. So the pre-get post action gets fired on every single WP query requests made in WordPress, including the main loop, but also for things like the navigation menu and any custom queries that we run. So first we have to make sure that we're operating on the main query. And then we can use the set method to set any additional query variables to WP queries, such as post type, to add, for example, a book post type to my stream, together with the post type. And the category not in says basically that exclude these IDs, these category IDs from my stream. So this is fairly easy, but with featured posts, it gets a little bit more tricky because we need a secondary query to get our featured posts, as well as alter the main query in order to avoid the duplicates. There are several different approaches for featured posts in WordPress themes, and my favorite is to use sticky posts. So here's a quick example. I created a function called myGetFeaturedPosts, which basically retrieves the sticky post option from the database, which is an array of post IDs that are set to sticky. And it returns a new WP query with the post in argument set to that array. So this will return 5 posts, 5 of the latest posts that are set to sticky. And we can then use this function whenever our featured post, is going to appear. We use it as a regular call to WP query, so we're using the have_post and the post function. We should not forget about the WP reset post data call at the end of our loop in order to not break things with the main loop. It's also a good idea to enclose this in a conditional call, because we generally want our featured post to appear only on the home page and not on any paged page, meaning only on the first page, not second, not third, only on the first page. So this is how we output our featured post. Now the last piece of the puzzle is to remove these posts that we queried from our main loop so that we don't get duplicates, we don't get sticky posts in our other section. So this is done with the pre-get_post action. Again, we're using the isMain query to operate on the main query only, and we're using the isHome function here to make sure that we're operating on the same query where our featured posts are output on the home page. So that's the same conditional tag. Then we use the myGetFeaturedPost function, the same function that we use to gather the featured posts, and we loop through the output and store the post IDs in an array, which we call exclude IDs, and we finally set the query arguments to post not in these exclude IDs. So we're excluding these posts from our main query, and finally we set the ignore sticky posts to true in order to tell WP query to not do any additional for sticky posts and prepend them to our query. So again, this is just one of the approaches for featured posts in WordPress themes. There are a lot of others, such as featured posts based on a tag or a category, but most of them use the same technique. So you're doing a secondary query for featured posts, and you're filtering the main query to avoid duplicates. So that's featured posts, but back to my point. We should avoid using query posts for this stuff. Query post is evil, query posts break things. Let's not use query posts. Next up, never start from scratch. So in WordPress we have several things or concepts that will let you speed up your theme development. We've got child themes, we've got theme frameworks, and we have starter themes. Child themes are good for making slight minor modifications to parent themes, like change the background color, change the width, like add a sidebar, those kind of things. And we can usually do this within like a couple of lines of code if the parent theme is coded in a proper way. If you're looking for good parent themes to start with or experiment with, you should try 2011 and 2012, which are great parent themes. Theme frameworks are usually big chunks of libraries with a lot of additional actions, functions, and filters that usually come with their own developer docs and sometimes their own community. These are usually made to build new WordPress themes but some of them often come in a form of a parent theme. Theme frameworks are a little bit complicated to get started with, even for the very experienced WordPress developers, because a lot of theme frameworks introduce a lot of new functions and filters and a lot of stuff that you have to learn before you can start to just using the framework. Starter themes, on the other hand, are a little bit easier to get started with, because it's basically a theme, a skeleton that has minor styles or no styles at all, and is often used where you would take the theme, copy it, rename it, and build it into your own new full-feature theme that is completely independent, unlike shell themes or themes built with frameworks. Starter themes are often forked, meaning they're copied into their own project, which is a nice way to sort of modify the starter theme to fit your own needs and to make it look and behave how you would like it to look, and you can use that starter theme in all your future projects. So code reuse is generally a good practice in programming. So okay, there are a few other concepts, starter themes, frameworks, and child themes, but those are a little bit more complicated. Anyway, let's move on to our next topic, which is know your tools. And there are a lot of tools and plugins out there, so I decided to share my favorite ones. This is a short list of the tools that I use when building and when working with themes. We'll quickly go through each one. So we've got Theme Check, which is a WordPress plugin that runs several thousand tests on your theme and basically tells you what's wrong with your theme. If you're planning to submit your theme to the WordPress.org directory, passing Theme Check is a must. The theme unit test is also a requirement for WordPress.org themes. It's basically an XML export which you can import into your own WordPress installation that will give you a lot of different content with images and comments and all that stuff, so that you can make sure that every piece of content looks well and works well in the theme. Next is log deprecated notices. This is a great plugin that will tell you whether you're using deprecated functions or deprecated arguments in functions. Next up is the series of debug bar extender, and debug bar console. Debug bar is like Firebug for WordPress. It's a must for all WordPress developers, not only theme developers. It basically lets you inspect queries. It lets you inspect the SQL that is running behind the scenes. It lets you measure things. And with the extensions, you can even get like a PHP and MySQL console running in your browser, which is pretty neat. Next up is the monster widget. This is a single widget which you can drop in any of your sidebars that will sort of print all the existing WordPress core widgets. So this is like a theme unit test only for your sidebars. And beta tester plugin. This is a plugin that lets you run the latest development version of WordPress and make sure that the themes that you are building are compatible with the next WordPress release. And last but not least is core control. This is a plugin that has a bunch of stuff in it, such as HTTP logging. So if you're working with things like, say, the Twitter API or the Flickr API in your theme, core control will let you inspect those HTTP queries and debug them, as well as debug like cron schedules and those kind of things. So that's about it. Those were the 7 tips. If you have any questions, raise your hand. All right.
Going back to the get template part stuff at the beginning.
Okay.
I've often felt the need and did create a function that's doing the same thing but lets you pass arguments to your template parts. So let's say you've got a pagination template part and you pass it a query, Adobe query object. Is there room for anything like that or need for that in get template part, or am I going, approaching the problem wrongly there?
Well, if you're like the main WP query object is already passed to whatever, like it's actually being passed from the locate template function. So the WP query object and also all the functions that operate on that object are available in whatever you include. So that's one thing that you wouldn't want to pass to your get template part. But especially when working with other frameworks that let you template stuff, it's common to think that I can pass like this object with data to my template, and my template then uses this data. Unfortunately, get template part is not trying to imitate that concept. It's simply breaking down your theme into several chunks. Obviously, you can use things like functions to pull your data from different templates. You can use globals, which is not a very good practice. But yeah, I think get template part is already quite complicated because of this fallbacks and child theme model. I think that adding that extra data to it would make it a little bit more complicated. But did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Raise your hand. Yes.
Yeah, if I have developed a tool that will be useful to be added to the debug extension,
Yep.
So how would I go about adding it to the plugin? Like, is there somebody or a team that observe all the commits?
So debug bar is actually a very neat plugin because it allows you to extend it without writing any additional stuff in the debug bar plugin itself. So debug bar extender and debug bar console in this list are actually additional plugins. They have nothing to do with the debug bar plugin. They may be developed by the same developers, but they're like standalone plugins, and you can choose whether to install them or not. They're like extensions for debug bar. So if you have anything to add to the debug bar, I would suggest you build that as a third-party plugin, and you can call it debug bar, like whatever it does, and just upload it to the WordPress.org directory, and maybe notify the original author of debug bar that there's this extension available. You can check it out. Maybe you can link to it from the plugin description page. Hands, questions? All right, well, thank you very much for joining, and have a good day.